want to become a leader comes with a lot of assumptions. So you need to break those assumptions first. Like, what do you mean when you say you want to become a leader?
Hi everyone. Welcome back. Again, coming to an exciting weekend, and I hope you're doing great. Thanks for joining again. And today we have an interesting friend of mine, very interesting to be very honest. Before I invite my friend, I would like to again set the intention of this video. Why are we doing this? This particular season is focusing on people who are working in development sector and hearing their stories, their fro clothes, and much more experiences, their struggle, and enjoying their successes with them. So this is what this season is all about. Please allow me to introduce the friend of mine who I'll be chatting today. Right. Today I have with me a person I've been knowing for last 7 years now. She is one ball of energy. Whenever you meet her, you get that energy and a positive vibe from her. She's been part of development sector from last 15 plus years now. She has volunteered. She was a fellow, and now she's working. And she has also worked with multiple orgs as full-time person, and volunteered with them. So it gives me immense pleasure to introduce and to bring her on my podcast today. Meghna. Hi, Meghna. Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Hi. Hi, Meghna. How are you? कैसे हो?
Hey, Kay. I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much. So what's up? Where are you?
I am here. I'm I'm based in Trivandrum currently, not actually in Trivandrum. So I'm a little away, like about 15, 20 kilometers away from Trivandrum. It's a small town called Velaini, and that's where I'm currently working and I'm currently based.
Nice, nice. So, Meghna, let's start. People, I just missed one part in Meghna's introduction. Is she is from Pune, moved to Mumbai, and now right now in the village. What Meghna has shared. So, Meghna, how did you reach here?
I mean, the organization that I'm working with called Kantari, it's not new to me. I studied social leadership here a couple of years ago when I wanted to start my own organization and build something which has a social impact. And that's how I came to know about the organization. And couple of months ago, like due to COVID, there was a certain lag in terms of building up my projects and the way projects were functioning, since everything went online. So I was looking for more exposure and something where I can work with more social change makers and gain more experience. So that's how I landed up here.
Nice, nice. So before moving into more detail about how did you land into development sector as general, we would like to hear your childhood story. Where did it started from? What did you study, and how was your childhood like?
That's quite a vast question, actually. But honestly, I don't remember too many things about my childhood. But what I remember is of my youthhood, as we can call it, like transitioning from childhood to becoming a youth. And a lot of memorable moments were in bunking college. Uh, I mean, that's the time I realized that I really don't understand how things are taught in college and universities. And I think one of my most memorable moments and turning points has been when I dropped out of law. And I took that decision. I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is not something which is me, and I can't study in a university. So yeah, that was a memorable moment.
Okay, okay. So after getting yourself dropped from law, what did you do next?
So that was the time when I was teaching contemporary dance. So I shifted my focus to teaching and choreographing for a couple of years, and there was immense learning there also, because I worked with children. I worked with children with disabilities. I worked with adults. I worked with elderly people as well. So it was a completely different range. And at the same time, I think when I was working as a dance teacher in one of the orphanages, that's how I got introduced to volunteering as well. And that's where my volunteering journey began.
So if I'm not wrong, your volunteering journey began somewhere in 2005-6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
What was your first stint as volunteer? Where did you volunteer?
I volunteered with Akanksha. That was my very first volunteering. Um, this was a little before I started dancing, um, just some time before, and I'd seen some advertisement of Akanksha needing volunteers, and I thought, let me sign up, and that's where I got introduced to it. Akanksha then used to have different centers which were catering to weekend teaching. So we used to go to different slum areas, gather all the children together and get to one center. And then we used to teach maths and science, one of the subjects. Yeah.
So from Akanksha, like from slum, what did you learn from that volunteering experience, your initial volunteering experience?
That was the moment I knew that I'm going to work with children. Like I knew this is something that I want to do and this is what I want to pursue. I didn't know how, like I don't know what I'm going to do, how I'm going to do this, but I knew that this is going to be my long-term work. And I continued, like from Akanksha, I continued to volunteer with other organizations. I volunteered with Teach India. There was some different programs that Teach India had done back then. This was 2009, 2008, I guess, quite some time ago. And from there, I also volunteered at a shelter which was for children who had mental health challenges and mental disabilities. So yeah, that's where my introduction to working with children happened.
So what's the joyous part of volunteering with children or being part with children?
One thing that I've realized is that I can be myself. There is no filter to me when I'm working with children. Sometimes I get these filters when I'm working with adults because I'm not sure how adults are going to perceive, and what if I say something that they take in some other way. But with children, that's not a worry. They just see you the way you are, and there is no judgment. There is no presumptions. So it's fun working with children, and it's a great buster to my anxiety as well. That's a place where I don't have to pretend.
So so after Akanksha, Teach India, is it Teach India or Teach for India? Both are different. Right?
Yeah, both are different. It's Teach India.
Yeah. Okay. So then, if I am not wrong, you move yourself towards fellowship, right? And what is that all about?
Actually, no. There's one more stint in between.
I'm sorry then. Yeah, please share.
So after Teach India, I think 2010 is when I got introduced to Bhumi, and that's how I got to know about Bhumi because of Vaishnavi from Bangalore, and we started the Pune chapter in 2010. So that was a very big turning point when it comes to volunteering, because I was taking some lead there. Before that, I was probably just going and teaching, and it was 2 hours in a week. But with Bhumi, when it started off, it was, I think, 8 hours a week, or probably sometimes even more than that.
Yeah, I can align you.
Yeah, so it introduced me to a lot of ground level realities. Then that what exactly are the challenges in the education system? What's happening around the city I live in? Uh, what kind of communities are there? What challenges they are facing? So there's a lot that I learned there. And while volunteering with Bhumi, I came across people who were fellows with Teach for India, who were working there, and I thought, this is something that I would like to do, and that's when I applied for the fellowship.
Mm-hmm. So what's before even moving into Teach for India, what's difference between volunteering and fellowship? What are the lines between both of them?
So every fellowship is different. I can't generalize it really that what could be, what do you say? How do you say it? Like what could be like one line difference, but the major difference that I've seen in most fellowships is that fellowships are full time. It's a full time commitment when you start doing a fellowship, and it could be of different in different areas. If I take Teach for India, for example, it's a full time fellowship where you work as a government or a private low income school teacher for 2 years, and you are literally a class teacher or a subject teacher for that particular time. So it's a full time commitment. It's like a regular job that you do. I mean, it's not even 9 to 5. It's like a lot more than that. Volunteering can be what you want it to be. It can be 2 hours in a week. It can be 10 hours in a week. It can be much more than that. It's completely up to you how you take up initiatives and what you want to get involved in, what connects with you. So I would say that's the major difference.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes to volunteering or fellowship, what should one intend towards? Like how should one choose that? Okay, is it a volunteering? Should I do volunteering or should I become a fellow?
Um, Again, depends on different groups. So I've had quite a few people ask me this question that I want to work full time in the non-profit sector. I want to do a fellowship, but I don't know what to do. And my answer is always that you need to try and understand whether this is something that you wish to pick up, because a lot of times volunteering and fellowship is considered as something that you can take up, and it may not be too much work, it may be less work, it may not be like a 9 to 5 job.
Hmm.
But I have to tell them it's a lot more than that. It's not a 9 to 5 job, but there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of passion, there's a lot of motivation that you need. So it really depends on what you want to do. Not everyone might want to get into a full-time career which is in the development sector. You may want to keep your career the way it is, but still contribute and do make a social impact. And volunteering helps you do that.
Hmm. So you brought a interesting point in your Bhumi Sint as volunteering, right? You said that you started Pune chapter, right? And how different is that now if I say it's not just volunteering, right? It's also
Yeah.
becoming a lead or becoming a leader. What was that journey like?
Oof, okay. There's a lot I can tell you, and probably we will finish off an hour if I keep talking about it. But like I said before, that journey introduced me to a lot of ground level realities. Uh, Earlier, when I was volunteering, there was someone already managing, like, all the struggles that go around ensuring that the children are here and we are able to teach a certain curriculum, we are understanding what the children really need. All of that was taken care of. I had to just go and teach. When it came to starting operations of going and teaching voluntarily in different homes, orphanages, and schools, we had to like literally scout for areas where there is a need. And to do that, you need to stretch yourself, you need to go talk to people, understand from them, where do they come from, what is their need, what is the children's need, and then figure things out. Like, I mean, that I think was the most interesting part for me, to just go and meet. I met so many new people. I met someone called Renutai Gavaskar, who's a very well known social worker, and she's been in this in this field for like almost, I think, 40-50 years now. And that was a huge thing for me, because back then that was my first connection with someone who's worked in this space for so long. So I met a lot of inspiring people, and that was something that helped me stick on to this sector. That there are so many people who have given in their life, who've given them in their energy for so many years, and this is something that you can really make a change in. So that was very inspiring.
So coming back, Meghna, with the story of leadership and volunteering turn leader, if today someone asks you that what are the things which I need to keep in mind when I want to become a leader, what would you advise them to?
I would say, first of all, this this notion of I want to become a leader comes with a lot of assumptions. So you need to break those assumptions first. Like, what do you mean when you say you want to become a leader? Leader in the conventional aspect is that you're leading people. While I see this sector and social change more as a collaborative space. So think of what can you contribute instead of thinking of I want to become a leader. How much more can I contribute? uh, what are the skills in me that I can give in? So that is something that I would say. So when I transitioned from teaching a few hours to coordinating managing projects in cities as a volunteer, I realized that that's the leap I wanted to take, not because I wanted to be a leader, but I had that, what do you say, that pull in me that there's more I want to do. Uh, there's more people I want to talk to. There are more organizations I want to support, or there are more volunteers that I want to talk to and speak to about how they can make a change. So that was my drive. So when someone wants to be a leader, I would definitely say introspect and understand first that what what is it that you want to bring and how do you want to support.
So Meghna is bringing one word very strongly often in this conversation is collaboration, right? And people who are watching this, I would like to bring one change which we brought in Bhumi this year, which was 15 years of Bhumi, is revisiting our values of Bhumi, right? So now we have three values of Bhumi, which is ownership, nurture to care, and collaboration. Back to your story of leadership, Meghna, how did that evolve you as a person?
That gave me a lot of clarity in the first place, that what is it that I really want to do. uh, what do I want my direction to be, because there is so much that you can do even in social sector, so much impact that you can create in every position. When I say I want to be in a leadership position, what exactly do I mean by that? So it gave me a lot of clarity there onto what my next steps should be. And my next step was to do something where I build something of my own and start my own work or start my own projects or start my own organization. So when I was working with the leadership sector in Bhumi, there were a lot of conversations that we used to have in terms of what are different projects that we can bring across for children. Or at that time also, I think Vaishnavi had started the school program, just kick started it, and there were different avenues coming out. So that's one place where I saw leadership in completely different aspects. So there was one area which was completely volunteer led, and then there was one area which was a school program, which where the crux there was something interesting as a fellowship coming up, and people wanting to join full time. So there were these two completely different aspects of leadership that I saw, and I realized that I need to carve my own path here. Like, what do I mean by leadership? And leadership for me somehow transformed into uh, doing a lot more on ground and not just being there to manage teams or not being there to just working from a space where I'm sitting in an office and working with people who are working on ground, but I wanted to go on ground and work myself. I wanted to establish and implement projects myself on ground. So that's one key aspect of uh, my own understanding which came in.
Nice, nice. So one thing which I often get from a few friends of mine or volunteers who are willing to work with, who are willing to become a leader is with leadership there comes plenty of power, plenty of control, and plenty of ego tussles and all those negative emotions. How should one overcome those emotions?
It's very valid, and I don't think anyone has spoken about this before, honestly. So a lot of people that even I speak to, we speak about always the positive side of leadership, but we never touch base upon this side of leadership, that it does bring in a lot of negative emotions. We call it negative emotions because it could bring in emotions like not accepting something, or being jealous of something, or uh, clashing with someone on ideas, or not able to communicate properly. So all of these aspects come in when you're working with a team or even different leaders. And I think the only way to tackle this is having an honest and transparent communication. There is really no other way to figure this out. A lot of times challenges come in place because we don't communicate them the way we should communicate. And I think it also boils down to our, like, I'm talking about the Indian aspect now, not going beyond India, but culturally we are, we grow up to not face conflicts. We grow up to keep conflicts aside and, say that I don't want to deal with this, or maybe shut ourselves down and say that this is not, I'm not comfortable with it. So that's how that happens in leadership as well, where there are conflicts but we don't face them, and we end up either like going away from those relationships, or breaking a relationship with that person or with a team member. And I mean, just not going beyond that because we don't want to deal with it.
Correct, correct.
So what has worked for me has always been open and honest communication, and it's not always nice. It's sometimes it is very difficult, because you may hear things that you don't like and you'll have to deal with that. But I think that breaks the ice, and that tells the other person that yes, you're offering your support to listen to that person, and you can come forward and talk about your challenges.
Nice, nice. How often, as a leader, you get such emotions, and what is your way at a self level, not at a bigger level, but at a self level to let it go?
I get it quite often, I would say. So I think with different people it's different, right? Like with me, it comes when there are a lot of assumptions made, even while working in a team, or working with a group of people. And when when I am in a conflict, the first thing probably I would do is get things clarified. Like, I would probably ask more questions, that do you mean this, or is this what you're trying to say? So I will always clarify that, because otherwise then I feel that, okay, I'm assuming what the person is saying. So that's my first step. And once I clarify that, then I get some peace and calm, that okay, now I know what the problem is and I can deal with this. uh, One way of dealing with it is to just take some time off. If I'm not able to deal with it at that moment, I tell the person that, can I come back and let's talk about it when I'm in a better place. I'm not able to think properly right now. So I have said that many times, and it helps. Not always the person will understand, but at least it puts your perspective, like what is happening with you. So that helps.
Thanks, thanks.
Yeah. Another thing that works is sharing why I felt this. Like, I share that, maybe you might have got offended, or you may not have liked this, but this came from my own understanding. So when I say that, the other person naturally calms down and gives an explanation. So I think just bridging that gap of communication becomes very important.
Nice.
Okay.
So I'd also like to hear your thoughts on one another topic which is very limitedly spoken about, is mental health. Uh,
Mhm.
right now, what I can see many of us, or many of us are started to have conversation. But where are you at with mental health conversations, and what are your recommendation to people who are going through that right now?
Where am I with mental health conversations? Actually, in a lot of spaces, because one is that the organization that I started, the first project's focus was on working with children who face anxiety and stress uh, due to the pressures that they face in the education system. So that that aspect of mental health has been very close to me, because even I as a child went through a lot of anxieties, and I still go through it. Of course, it doesn't go away. Just to differentiate, everyone has anxiety. I mean, everyone has a bit of anxiety in them, but a lot of people, for them, it becomes an adrenaline. Like, it's a good thing, which makes them, even like, it's a driving force for them. But for a lot of people like us, it does not, it stops the driving factor in us. Like, we can't function after a period of time, or we get into a loop of overthinking, and um, not trying, like, trying to figure out uncertainties, so that becomes a big loop for us. So this happens in children as well. And now, when I understand this better, I can think of instances in my childhood where I used to do the same things and connect to it. So mental health is definitely a lot close to me. And apart from the project that I want to work with children, the current work that I'm doing is also with a lot of social change makers. And right now, we are trying to figure out what are the support systems that we can put in place for social change makers in terms of mental health. Because as change makers, or as volunteers, or as anyone who works in the social impact space, we always forget that, our mental health is important. Um, Also, because we see a lot of challenges in front of us. And going by my own experience, I always put myself in a place thinking that, oh, my struggles are not very important, because what I'm currently doing is a lot more important. There are many others who are going through worse challenges in their lives, or worse struggles in their lives, but we don't realize how that impacts us. And as leaders, we keep pushing ourselves to do the work, ignoring that, it's taking a toll on us. So I think these are two really important aspects that we need to work on, apart from understanding on our own mental health. Like, if anyone is working in the social space, we need to figure out, when are we burning out, when are the times when we don't feel like working, and how can we take a step back, recharge, and come back.
Mm, mm. Yeah, a big shout out to people who are working on mental health, and a small request to whoever is going through this mental health issue. Please reach out to help. It's not a taboo. It's not something which you should be hiding. There are ways you can get out of it. So please help yourself and reach out to people whom you are aware and get help. That's what I would like to uh, request here. Moving forward, Meghna, from your journey of volunteering to fellowship, and now uh, volunteering fellowship, founder, and now a full time, right? I know there's a spike between founder and full time, and again full time. How did this transformation happen? What made you go through this transformation?
Transformation of working full time.
Yeah, yeah.
uh, Working full time actually started since 2013, when I joined the Teach for India Fellowship. And after working as a teacher for 2 years, I knew that I'm not going to leave. I'm going to continue in this space. This is what I want to do. Interestingly, I've never worked with a corporate before, and I didn't even want to see that side of life. I was like, I don't want to even get there, because this is where my passion lies. And that's where I started. So after Teach for India, I joined Bhumi as a full-time employee for almost 3.5 years. And that's when I realized that I want to do more work on ground and I want to build projects myself. I want to start an organization. Um, when I was thinking of all those things, I came across Kanthari. I think it's one of the few institutes in the country which looks at learning by doing and not, there's no theory in their curriculum. Everything is something that you practically experience through 8 months. So that's what really caught my eye, because being a dropout, I was like, I don't want to get into another university and go through the same thing again. And that's how I started, and that's where I started my organization Moringa as well. From there, I did some pilot projects in 2019 December, and I had a good plan chalked out when COVID struck us like and I since the projects were very new, and because schools and everything went online by then, almost all the projects shut off. And that's when I was also thinking, what more can I do? uh, do I still want to continue doing something online, or is there any place where I can use this opportunity and learn a lot more? And that's how Kanthari full-time work happened. They were looking for someone who can build an alumni network of ethical social change makers. And that's where I connected with, because most of the social change makers that we work with come from different spaces. Like they work in education, gender, farming, agriculture, disabilities. So they work in various sections. And for me, that was like, okay, there can't be a better opportunity than this to learn. So that's how I landed up full time again.
Moving to your current organization, Kandhari, what does this organization do, and how can people contribute to this organization?
So this it's a social leadership institute. The aim is to empower social visionaries. So anyone who has faced an adversity, struggle, challenges in life, they can apply to Kanthari to learn social leadership. It's a 12-month course. 7 to 8 months is on campus, and 5 months is where you want to implement your project or your social venture. So we have participants coming from across the world. Currently, we are about 226 alumni in 48 countries. And this year we have 17 more from 8 different countries participating. So, I mean, that's the whole idea, was that how can we as an institute or social leadership space equip others to realize their dreams, the change that they want to bring. And many a times while working with everyone now, I've realized that whichever community we come from, there has been an instance in our life when we have felt excluded. All of us have felt excluded in some way or the other. And it's not like we are always in an inclusive space. So there are some things that trigger us, there are some things that we've gone through, and how do we use that to channelize our energy and effort to bring a social impact? So that's what the entire course is. It's completely hands-on practical training course. And once we go out of this, we start our own organizations or social ventures. Where people can contribute is, of course, I mean, one is the funding aspect. Like if there are any organizations who are willing to fund social change makers or their projects individually, they can just go to our website, that's kanthari.org, and they can check out what the alumni are doing, and go to their websites directly and see if they want to support them directly. We do take in volunteers as well, who can make a long-term commitment, say, for 6 or 7 months, because it becomes very important that if they're involved in curriculum, then they need to be here for the entire course. So if you wish to come to a beautiful place which is filled with greenery, there is lake, and there's nature around you, and you would like to do residential volunteering, then this is another opportunity where you can come and provide your skills and at the same time learn a lot. Third space is where there are existing volunteers. If volunteers are listening to us right now and you want to build something of your own, this is a place that you can apply to, that you can apply to Kanthari to start your own organization or start your own project, and go through the Kanthari website and you'll find all the information there.
Nice. Thank you so much, Mix, for sharing the work Kandari is doing. And I wish Kandari get much more volunteers, supporters, and to all the alumni who are working towards social change, a good luck. Mix, we have come to last segment of our conversation, and this is one thing which I am fascinated about, which is what if moment, right? And now I'd like to put you on a spot where I'd like you to come up with a what if moment in your life, which you think that would have made a huge change where you are today.
Yeah, you've really put me on the spot. Huh? I have this what if moment. It's not personally just with me, but in general. I have this moment when I feel, what if there was no discrimination? And it's something that's so unthinkable because discrimination has become so normal. So it's I go into that what if phase, and thinking about, imagining it, how world would be if there was no discrimination, or if people were not segregated because of whatever their religion, race, color, caste, gender, you name it. And since childhood, even I did face a lot of discrimination, and I keep thinking, what if that had not happened? Or what if I had gotten opportunities in my school to figure out what I love doing or what I like doing? Maybe I would be a different person today. And I'm sure similarly there are a lot of people, youth, children, who think that way, that what if I had this opportunity, or what if I was understood, or what if I didn't have to struggle uh, to be myself? That would be my what if.
Nice. That's the power of working in this sector, right? You put the community, the country, and people ahead of yourself, right? That what if there's no discrimination? And that's something which is fascinating, and that's what I love about people who are in this sector. And this is such a nice conversation, Meghna. Thank you so much, and I hope your conversation inspire people, bring more people to development sector, and whatever change we would like to see in today's world for our next generation. Thank you so much, Max, and it's been wonderful talking to you.
Absolutely, same here, AK. Thank you so much for having me here. And like you said, I hope a lot of people figure out the spark in themselves and see where they can contribute when it comes to social change. You do not have to always be full time to work in social change space.
Yeah.
Think of how you can do what you can do in smaller ways, in your own ways, in your own community, locality, in your homes. In fact, uh, it could just be with your own family, but see how you can change things there.
Wonderful. Thanks, Meg.